Good afternoon. May we start the session? Well, firstly, may I welcome you all here to the Women in Law Delivering the Agenda for Change. And I'm delighted that I can welcome my lords, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm very pleased to say that the issue of women in the law is a debate and an issue for all of us in the profession. So I'm very pleased to see as I say, ladies and gentlemen in the room. My name is Julia Bateman. I'm head of the international team at the Law Society of England and Wales. We've convened this session today to talk about the Women in Law International Summit that we held in London in 2012 in partnership with the National Association of Women Lawyers in the US. What we want to do today is talk about progress, challenges and action for diversity in our legal profession, in our judicial profession. We want to share the conclusions from our summit with you here today, and also to have a dialogue, a debate about the issues facing lawyers around the world. Three hot topics, three key issues came out of the Agenda for Change report, and we have copies for you. We talked about workplace culture. We talked about client-led demand, how businesses are demanding diversity in those that advise them, diversity in their lawyers. And we talked about the thorny issues of quotas and targets. And ultimately, how it's the responsibility of all of us to manage the talent, the diverse talents we have in our profession. The report also looked at how women can be fairly represented in positions of influence, positions of power, and positions of leadership. And I'm delighted and very proud to present a panel today of influential, powerful, leading women in the law. It's my great honor to welcome Deputy Minister Elena Borisenko, who we have to thank for this marvelous St. Petersburg Legal Forum, and we're very honored, Minister, that you can join us. I shall ask Minister Borisenko to say a few words, and then each of the panel members will reflect on their experience. As I say, we do want this to be a debate. We do want to hear from you, the audience. We're also very honored as well to have the Minister of Justice from Cuba, and we shall ask her to address the group after Minister Borisenko. So welcome everybody, and without much further ado, Elena.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I would like to extend my thanks to the Law Society and ABA for actually pressuring us very actively to put this on the agenda of the forum. Frankly speaking, in all my experience, in all my career, I never even reflected on the topic of women in law, that it could be a separate, valid subject. It just so happened to me, so it happened so to my country. But historically, women's emancipation and women's fight for their rights began in Russia even before the October Revolution of 1917. In 1917, the situation was radically turned around. Women gained access to all professions, even non-female professions, very sophisticated professions. They even acquired access to hard physical labor. So in the 20th century, women established themselves very firmly on an equal footing with men in Russia as well as in the other Soviet republics. So these may be the reasons why in Russia women in professions, women in law are so numerous. We have a lot of women MPs. We have a lot of women judges. I would even say that we have more women judges than men judges in Russia. And we have them as presiding judges. We have them in Supreme Court and in the higher courts in general. We have a lot of women in the ministries, a lot of women who are heads of various ministerial departments. We're seeing more and more women coming to lead whole ministries, being put in political positions, political appointments. This is why, I must confess, I have not given very thorough thought to the issues that our colleagues presented here. However, I looked at some reports prepared by ABA. I looked at some of the information that was presented by our colleagues from the UK, and then I realized that yes, this is a valid issue to discuss indeed. And the reason why it deserves a lot of attention is as follows. You know, in the modern world, we have to provide opportunities. And once the opportunities are there, it's up to the people and their free will to make their choices. So I think women have a very important mission in life. Women are the only ones who can become mothers and who are expected to become mothers, and very often this work-life challenge is very difficult for women. Sometimes women either dedicate all their resources to work and they end up without a family in their advanced age, without children. Perhaps this is not the best life one could imagine, but on the other hand, this fight for more opportunities, fight for more functions can be very challenging as well, because in a work setting, men sometimes don't even realize that women have to go back at some point to take care of their children, to take care of their husbands. Sometimes managers are ignorant of the fact that women simply cannot spend 20 hours a day at work. And sometimes a lot of that thinking is dominated by the stereotype that if you chose to be a professional woman, you have to do everything very professionally without thinking about any other spheres of your life. Well, at the end of the day, of course, it's up to every man and woman to choose what they want to do. I remember a very long time ago I saw an advert of an ice cream. It's an American advert published back in the 1940s for an ice cream, and I remember this was about a young man who spent his last cent buying an ice cream rather than buying something for his girlfriend. And I think the punchline was that life is a series of choices. Yes, indeed, life is a series of choices, and our colleagues are talking a lot about how do we combine private life and professional life. I think that ultimately there can be no regulation of this issue. It's a matter of personal choice. It's a matter of personal life decisions. When I looked at the report, I was surprised to learn that in this particular matter, in terms of women's participation, we're very much ahead of other European countries and ahead of the US. Let me give you some data. Russia uses the Latin system of notariate. To be a notary in Russia is very prestigious. Notaries make a lot of money. They enjoy good work conditions. So 85% of our notaries are women. 60% of lawyers are women. About 60% of all judges are women. So as you see, women in law are very well established. Perhaps it would be even more appropriate to discuss men in law and what's awaiting them. But if you take large law firms, on the other hand, and again, this is maybe where our discussion is going today. But I remember that back in the 1990s, when Russia began renewing its legal system, women were the first to respond. They were not afraid of the new. Many of them had foreign languages. They were more flexible than men, so they were among the first lawyers to be hired by foreign law firms. This is how they really hit the ground running. They built their careers very quickly. So if you look at representative offices of various foreign law firms here, there are a lot of women in managerial and leadership positions there. However, if you look at the contemporary trends in the West, these trends seem to be coming to Russia as well. If you look at the motivation and compensation systems, they're structured in such a way that if somebody chooses from a pool of young lawyers, very often the choice is in favor of men, and sometimes that choice is meant by senior women because they realize how difficult it would be for a young woman professional to combine professional growth and other aspects of life. So they opt for men because they can trust that men will be effective, efficient, that men will not have all those distractions. I'm about to wrap up my very short intervention. I hope this is going to be a very productive discussion. Nevertheless, wrapping up, I would like to share with you this story. This is something that caused a very strong emotional reaction on my part because, yes, I am in charge of all matters pertaining to legal profession in the ministry, but I also work in the Constitutional Court. And recently the Constitutional Court heard a case in which a man was contesting a constitutional provision of the labor code that gives women guarantees, women who have several children. Women are given preference under that provision when there are layoffs, when there is some short sizing, and he insisted that he should be entitled to those guarantees as well because he was the only breadwinner. His wife was a homemaker, so because the equality principle had to be respected, he demanded guarantees. And the Constitutional Court recognized his case, his position, and we're currently bringing our labor legislation in compliance with that decision. I'm not really about to contest the Constitutional Court decision here, but I think that the contrary, the opposite position was also true, because that provision in the labor code was created exactly to enable women to have equal access to the labor market, because when men come to a job interview, nobody cares about whether that man has a family or children or not, whereas everybody is interested in that side of a woman's life. And in order to remove that barrier, they decided to create that labor law provision. I think this case illustrates very well the fact that women are very active and proactive in Russia. Women are very well established in professional life, and in my personal experience, throughout my career, I have never had a situation whereby I would not be hired to a position or I would be ousted on the basis of my gender. It just never happened, and even more than that, sometimes I find it easier to get a job done as a woman. Okay, I wish you a good discussion.
Thank you very much for that. I think we know that we will have achieved when we actually have a session called People in Law, and we don't have to talk about men or women. I wonder, would the minister from Cuba like to say some words?
Buenos días, estimados colegas. Bueno, en el caso de Cuba, tenemos que decir que también
And we have to say that with us in Cuba, women are also a majority in the legal profession. Besides, there is a law protecting us, so that we don't have to make this tough decision, so that we could both pursue a brilliant career and remain great mothers of our families. In our case, the law grants a woman a 1-year protection, and this year the woman can stay with her children at home. And she can retire at the age of 60 or after that. In my country, a lot of women who have jobs have more than one child. That's why we can pursue our careers and have time for our families at the same time. Since 1959 in Cuba, back when the political and economic dependency linked us to our powerful neighbor, the United States. Then that link was broken by the revolutionary victory, and the overwhelming power of the people selected the social path of development. Important changes happened back then, and those included changes in the law. The law identified the revolutionary changes and accepted and accommodated them. And one of those most important changes was recognition of complete equality of women. At the same time, since the early days of the revolution, on a unilateral basis, the United States started an economic, social, and political blockade or siege of the Cuban Republic. That hugely affected the political, economical, and social life of the country and, of course, the life of Cuban women. As of today, Cuba is undergoing an in-depth transformation in its economic and social model. We are not trying to find some simple recipe, a silver bullet that can be given to us by any international organization. The Cuban people took a decision and it was adopted by the Cuban people and eventually adopted and approved by the 6th Congress of the Cuban Communist Party. The resolution says that the economic system of Cuba shall be based upon socialist property, which is ownership of all property by the whole people. The social equality is the overriding principle of Cuban political life. Everyone should give according to their capabilities and everyone should receive according to their needs. This expresses the political idea of political equality within the Cuban Republic. We are trying to implement the Cuban economic model, implying the continuous economic development of the national economy. This principle is stated in the fundamental law of the country. We are also combining this with fostering the social and ethical values specific to the Cuban Republic. We are trying to find ways to increase the external revenues. The country is looking to replace imports and increase the productivity of the national economy. We are also working at redistribution of incomes. We are restructuring the national administration system. These profound economic changes must definitely be accompanied by institutional and legal changes. That will guarantee social development of the country, and that will bring the Cuban society to enhanced freedom and liberty. As we are setting up legal and institutional framework to further improve the national legislation, the Ministry of Justice has the role of coordinator and advisor to all the bodies and agencies of the national administration. In particular, the role of the Minister of Justice is to control the compliance of the newly amended norms to the underlying principle of the current legislation. We have to draft all the legal formulations that are needed to reproduce all the political aspects of national life. Besides, it is necessary to use the principal formulations that have to stay in the revised legislation with the norms that have to be kept from the previous version. Among the norms adopted lately, we have to speak about the stipulation for redistribution of state lands. 144,000 hectares of land were transferred in January 2012 to over 160,000 Cuban individuals. And lots of them were women. We regulate transfer of movable and immovable property title. We are improving the procedure for getting bank loans. We're devising the new tax legislation and modifying the immigration laws, as well as the laws on recruitment and non-agricultural cooperatives. By the beginning of year 2013, 106 new legal provisions have been adopted. 356 legal provisions have been cancelled. 30 provisions have been updated. This involves a broad and complex procedure that definitely will touch upon the whole of the national legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, this whole process grants women a critical role. Women play a crucial role not only in enforcing the laws, they also are involved in enhancing the Cuban economic policy. They are an indispensable part of the process of real administration. With regard to the legal area, over 70% of lawyers in Cuba are women. As a result of the state strategy targeting bringing women to public governance, 1/3 of our cabinet ministers are women. 8 ministers of the cabinet are women, and that is exactly 1/3. Practically half of our deputies are women.
proceso de transformación de nuestro modelo económico y social. Основываясь на этом, Куба может утверждать, что
With a basis like this, Cuba can definitely proceed transforming its economy and its social model.
lo que afirmara el presidente del Consejo de Estado y de Ministros, el general de Ejército, Raúl Castro, en el 10º periodo de sesiones de la Asamblea Nacional del Poder Popular.
As our President, General Raúl Castro, at the 10th plenary session of the General People's Assembly,
tras las medidas iniciales de supresión, de prohibiciones y otras trabas para el desarrollo de las fuerzas productivas,
it's very important to implement the Cuban national economic model to overcome the action of current limitations. We need to undertake initial measures to stop the bans limiting the development of productive powers of the country.
I think you have underlined the very important aspects of women lawyers, women in the legal economy, and the contribution of all. I think I'm delighted next to invite Lucy Scott-Moncrieff, the President of the Law Society of England and Wales, who championed the report and chaired the Legal Summit, to reflect on her experience from England and Wales. Thank you, Lucy.
Well, clearly there are major cultural differences around the world, and I'm sure reflected in the audience as well as on the panel here. I'm going to be talking about the position of women in large law firms in the West. And some of this will be relevant to other people here and others not. We start from the position that talent is distributed evenly across the population and certainly evenly across the profession. That it's not possible to say that men are better at this sort of law than women, or women are better at this sort of law than men. The talent is spread evenly. And actually this is reflected in the entry levels for our profession. I'm talking about the England and Wales now. Over half of the young lawyers who qualify are women. And in the big law firms, the big commercial law firms, over half of their new recruits are women. But as you go higher and higher up those firms, that changes. So that's the problem. What goes wrong? What goes wrong? What stops those talented young women from becoming senior partners in the same proportion as the talented young men become senior partners? The report that we commissioned identified that there are essentially cultural issues. And there's one cultural issue which has already been referred to by the previous speakers, which is mainly it's the women who bring up the children. Now that's a cultural issue with which the Law Society does not wish to engage. There it is, that's a fact, that's for society to change. But there's another cultural issue, and that is the culture within these large law firms. I'm going to give sort of 3 examples of where I think that there could be room for improvement. Firstly, a lot of large law firms will have flexible working policies. But it turns out that if you apply for flexible working policies, you're put in the slow stream. You're seen as not totally committed. You've got other interests, how dare you? And so that affects people's ability to move up the rankings. Now, for some people, being put in the slow stream is absolutely fine. They want to have that balance. But for others, particularly when their children have gone to school or whatever, they then want to get back onto the fast track where their talent would lead them. One matter that really has to be tackled is for flexible working and remote working to become normal, not to become a gender thing, not something that just women do, and not something just women with children do, but something that all sorts of people do within a firm. And there are some very good examples of practice. There's one firm that makes all its partners work flexibly and remotely for a week a year, just to show that it doesn't mean being lazy. Working flexibly and working remotely doesn't mean you're sitting around peeling grapes when you should be hard at work. So that's very good, because it then passes down, their attitudes change, and a lot of those people then say, oh, can I do this a bit more often? But also we need to get it so that flexible working is being introduced very early on. The thing about working in the law is that it's a task-based profession. You have a particular task to achieve. Does it really matter if you're in the office or working remotely? I mean, you could be at home, you could be on the beach, you could be in all sorts of places. So long as you get the task done, that's what counts. I mean, obviously there has to be office-based stuff as well and teamwork and all of that, but it doesn't all have to be in the office. You don't have to be in the office the whole time, and that needs to become far more normal at all stages, so that when a woman who wants to spend more time at home because she's just had a child or whatever says flexible working, well, yeah, why not? You know, there are all sorts of reasons why people work flexibly. So that's a really important thing that needs to be tackled. The second one is, as Julia mentioned, targets. We don't believe in quotas, because quotas are imposed usually by government, and they're rigid, and the women who get chosen as a result of quotas feel tainted by that. You know, they don't want to be chosen as a result of quotas, they want to be chosen on merit. But what we do think is a good idea, and what a number of our largest firms have taken up, is targets. And what the difference is this: if you decide to adopt targets, then the senior people within the firm look at the talent in the firm. They look at their associates, their junior partners, and so on and so forth, or their newly admitted lawyers, and think, if we do everything right, where are these people going to be in 5 years, in 10 years? What's their potential if we get everything right and if they stay with us? And then they set the targets on that basis. You know, we should have this number of junior partners who are women, this number of junior partners from minority ethnic backgrounds, and so on and so forth, so that they can track their own performance. And then if those targets aren't reached, it's not that the women are useless or can't be bothered or just walked away or whatever. It's because the firm is doing something wrong with its ability to maintain the careers of the young women in the organisation. And the firm is actually losing talent that it had identified at entry level, that it had nurtured, and then suddenly all that's thrown away. And it will encourage firms, this process encourages firms to look at all their practices. For instance, you know, if you have a merits-based system for appointing partners, well, is your merits-based system too narrow? Do you give too much credence to earning power and not enough credence to creativity or team building, or a whole variety of skills that people will have that actually are very important for partners? You don't just want people who can earn a lot of money. That's what the people at the lower level are there for. You work harder, and then as you get higher up, it's a different set of skills that people ought to have. And so if you have targets rather than quotas, then it forces firms to think creatively about its own practices and whether it's doing things right. So those are things that you know, senior people in firms can decide to adopt, and we hope that they will. But we think that there's another issue as well, and maybe this isn't an issue in Russia, maybe it isn't an issue in Cuba, it's certainly an issue in the UK, and that is the attitude of women. Women lawyers usually get to qualify through being really hard-working, head down, you know, very, very conscientious, and just doing it and getting it out there. And then, you know, they get assessed and so on by the academics who say, yes, this is an excellent piece of work, and so on and so forth. Well, that attitude on its own isn't going to get you very far in a law firm, because in a law firm it's deeply competitive, and you have to be pushy. You have to be a bit pushy to get noticed, because if you don't say, yes, it was me who did that piece of work, then someone else is going to say, oh yes, it was me, oh yes, she helped a bit, but yeah, I'll take the credit for that. You've got to believe in yourself, or at least you've got to pretend to believe in yourself. There's a story that I've been told by 2 or 3 women in senior law firms. You know, if they have a project and they want some volunteers to engage in this project, and they'll set out a series of criteria. Let's say 10, you know, essential criteria or good to have criteria. And the young men look at it and say, oh, I've got 3 of those, I'm going to apply. And the young women look and say, oh, I've only got 9 of those, I'd better not apply. Now, that's the problem. You know, what you've got to think about with these criteria, it's like a Lonely Hearts ad. Yes, I want someone who is tall, dark, handsome, rich, good sense of humour, but actually I'll probably settle for well, make your choice. Rich, good sense of humour. You know, you don't need all of them. That's your wish list. And women have got to learn to see these things as wish lists and not necessarily something that you've absolutely got to achieve all of it. And they also need to realise that although the blokes might be looking very confident, they're nervous too, you know, but they're better at covering it up. And you have to volunteer for things. And you think, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. But actually, once you've said you'll give it a go, then you have to do it. And people will remember that you've had a go, not that you were nervous. They'll remember that you made a contribution, not that you were feeling shy about it. So it's really, really important that women you know, look at the people around in the firms where you're working. Look at what works. Look at how people succeed by sort of getting to the front of the queue and copy it. And then after a while, it becomes second nature. I mean, I, like the Minister, have never noticed any discrimination, but I think that's probably because I'm not very observant. But it's quite good to just not be observant, just sort of get through there and big yourself up. It's not something that women are very good at. Maybe they are in Russia, but you know, that's what you need to do. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. As I said, it's not a question of social engineering or quotas or making decisions that are for society and the population. It's about how the professional bodies, lawyers themselves, law firms can actually assist people making their choices in their career. I'm delighted to welcome Linda Klein, who's the representative of the American Bar Association, with whom we work very closely with, and we hope to hear from the American experience as to the practical steps, the concrete action that can be taken. So welcome, Linda, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Julia. I'm going to limit my remarks to the published program agenda about how women as lawyers and the American Bar Association are working with very specific practices on this issue. The problem we studied at the American Bar Association is that just about anywhere you look in the world, women are paid significantly less than men for the same work, and that over an entire career, a woman will earn $2 million less than a man doing the same job, just the same people that she graduated from law school with. In a law firm, unbelievably, the pay disparity decreases as the seniority level increases, so that equity partners in law firms, the disparity between male and female pay is the largest. So to begin with, to fix these problems, we need to start with hiring practices. So first, and this has no cost, is that to be sure that at least one woman is interviewed for every open position in the law firm. Second, to make sure that the people who are interviewing the candidates for the position are equally balanced, male and female, whether the candidate is a woman or the candidate is a man. After hiring the young lawyers, then we need to have equitable performance evaluations. And one way to combat what we call subtle or implicit bias is with bias-free performance evaluations. The American Bar Association's Commission on Women has a very important publication. It's called Fair Measure, and it outlines a step-by-step process for implementing and conducting performance evaluations from lawyers that are free from any gender bias. The book includes sample evaluation forms, performance evaluation training materials for supervising attorneys, and instructions for completing the performance evaluations. It also contains a comprehensive view of the psychological literature on stereotyping. Developing an evaluation system that eliminates hidden bias is crucial, and given that attorneys' performance evaluations have a direct impact on their professional development, on the assignments that they get, on their compensation, and ultimately partnership, this is very important. Now, once we have a method of evaluating the young lawyers and they can achieve partnership, then we need to assure that our partner compensation methods are likewise fair. And here are some ideas that we have at the American Bar Association for equitable partner compensation. First is that we need to give women appropriate credit for business generation and business retention. There's a perception that's well documented that women are not as good at generating business as men. That is an implicit bias, if not an explicit bias. 55% of women partners surveyed said they had been denied their fair share of client origination credit. and a third of women partners said they had been subjected to some type of intimidation or threat or bullying about getting origination credit. And that's even more true of women who are minority partners. They're more likely to have those problems. Indeed, women minority partners reported that they were asked to come to a successful client proposal meeting. We call that a pitch meeting. And then they received no origination credit and not even any of the work that's gotten. So in other words, they were only invited to attract the business, but not to do the business. So law firms must afford women equal client development opportunities, encouraging them to go at pitch meetings and then being rewarded for the business that is developed at these pitch meetings. The next thing that we talk about is a fair plan to pass on business when older lawyers retire. In the next decade, 400,000 lawyers will retire in the United States, and that greatly increases the number of clients that will be passed on to the next generation of lawyers. And it's important that all lawyers have an equal opportunity to inherit that business. And law firms need to plan for that. A third element is transparency. There needs to be a transparency regarding compensation, and law firms have to ensure that everyone understands what the criteria are for being chosen a partner in the law firm. Then next, we want law firms to look at metrics of the compensation within the firm, salary, bonuses, benefits across the whole firm, all the demographics and all the practice areas, and then use the metrics as a baseline and look at their progress and understand what disparities are found. We've talked about implicit bias and how that must be eliminated. There's a lot, we could talk for days about that. The next thing is equitable credit for doing non-billable work. Lucy talked about how there are lots of components, many things that make a good partner candidate, and non-billable work that enhances the law firm is very important, and many women do a disproportionate amount of that work. Accountability. We have to have compensation systems that have safeguards and procedural mechanisms to allow anyone who has a complaint or a concern about lack of transparency or fairness in the partner compensation model to be raised in a context that is safe without resulting in any negative reprisals from raising the questions. And then there needs to be a method of dispute resolution within the law firm in case there are disputes about compensation, and that needs to be a fair committee that reviews that has equal numbers of men and women involved. There's been a lot of discussion recently about client participation in law firm compensation, and that may sound strange to some of us, but there are some clients, of course, that are concerned that a lawyer's motivation has to equal the client's interests in having a fair price paid for the legal work. But also clients want diverse legal teams because clients know that diverse legal teams are more creative than homogeneous legal teams. So how are we going to implement these changes? The American Bar Association is directing a series of projects that have very specific strategies for best practices for law firms to ensure that women are fairly compensated. The first one is available on the internet now for free download. It's the Toolkit for Gender Equity in Partner Compensation. And this is made for bar associations and law societies to raise awareness of the problem of gender equity. And it's a first step so that these bar associations can begin a dialogue on this important topic. It encourages law firms to change compensation policies by establishing objectives to reach pay parity. And the toolkit recommends the solutions that I've just discussed. And here is the web link for free download, www.americanbar.org/gender equity. That's one word, gender equity. The American Bar Association is going to produce 3 more products targeting 3 separate audiences. The first is law firms, and that will be a guide for law firms to achieve gender equity in partner compensation. It will talk about recommended best practices, where they've been successful, and how these best practices work. It will discuss how gender bias impedes the goals of growth of law firm talent development and law firm profitability. and explain that law firms that do not have pay parity between men and women lose the women, and that is very costly to lose this talent. And it will explain how gender inequities at the partner level is a bad problem, and we need to close those gender gaps in compensation. The second product will be for women lawyers, and it will be a booklet to tell them how to go about negotiating compensation. And the final product is for the clients, for the general counsels of corporations, to explain how important their role is in assuring gender equity in law firms. I don't know how much more time I have. Okay. I will very quickly say that there are women's initiatives in law firms that will enhance career development. In my law firm, we have such a women's initiative to show our ongoing commitment to promote the value of women attorneys in our firm. And it has been very successful. And if you'd like to know more about that, I'll be happy to tell you about how the law firm of Baker Donaldson has been able to put some very important women's initiatives together. I think someone else is going to talk about women in leadership and how that is important. And I think someone else is going to talk about mentoring and how that's important. So I'll just close by saying that we need to talk together, men and women. We need to act collectively as leaders and make sure that we can work to change. We need to network locally, we need to network nationally, we need to network internationally so we can support a global support system for change, and that will bring about equal treatment for women and opportunities for pay and otherwise within the legal profession, and that will benefit not only the profession but certainly society as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. I think the remarks you made, particularly about implicit bias and stereotypes and the concrete measures to address that, are something that I think we can all learn from and be inspired by. Thank you. I'm delighted to welcome next Irina, who's going to give us her perspective as a Ukrainian lawyer and from the wider CIS region. Irina, over to you.
My name is Irina Poliashvili. I am a managing partner of a Ukrainian law firm. I'm also president and senior counsel of a Russian-Ukrainian legal group. We bring together best legal companies of the CIS countries. At the end of June, we are supposed to meet in Kiev and then later in Odessa. And I would like to use this opportunity to invite you to the 8th meeting that we're going to hold. We have a very strong female wing, and we have a lot of managing partners that come from various CIS countries. Many of them are women. Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Kyrgyzstan are the leaders in this sphere. What I'm going to talk about today is this. We talk about the role of Russian women lawyers in the US, but I have worked for a long time in the US. I work in Ukraine. I often visit Moscow. And I would like to give you a comparison. It's a very brief overview. It is not based on statistics. It's an informal analysis that I performed myself using my personal experience over the past 20 years. 20 years ago, I arrived in Chicago. I worked as a guest client in one of the big law companies, General Clark. When I arrived there, we had the Soviet Union still. It was just right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, 1991. And in Soviet Russia, we were very familiar with the role of women in the law profession. In fact, we had a lot of lawyers, women lawyers in the profession. It was nothing out of the ordinary for us. We had notaries who were women, we had lawyers, and in a way there was a glass ceiling. Of course, only very few of these women were able to enter the top positions in the legal profession, but the critical mass of women lawyers was there. So when I went to the US at the beginning of the 90s, I was amazed at the fact that there were so few women at different levels. The entry level, the medium level, the top level contained very, very few women. Over the past 20 years, a lot has been changed, and I was very interested to follow the dynamic. Over the past 20 years, I would say that in the US, we have seen a great progress. They have made a step forward, and we remained where we were 20 years ago. So this is what I'm very much concerned about, and I'm sure that this would be of interest to women lawyers and men lawyers. So what happened in the US? Why did it happen? Why did we see such a revolution in the legal profession? At that time, a lot of young women studied at law school. And I think I arrived in the US at the time when finally we saw this change. We finally saw a lot of young women who entered the legal profession. They have not yet had time to become partners. There was a specific catalyst to this process. I don't know if my American colleagues would agree with me, but there was a big case about Anita Hill Clarence Thomas. There was a hearing at the Congress about sexual assault or some kind of harassment against a woman lawyer, and I think this was the catalyst. It doesn't matter what was at the heart of this scandal, but I think for the first time publicly, women decided to talk about their problems. It was a very important step forward. It was a very controversial situation, and a lot of people took it in different ways. But the fact that there were professional problems that women experienced and that they wanted and were ready to discuss these problems publicly, I think this was served as an impetus to making these problems heard. And that's why the American Bar Association started to pay more attention to these problems. Everyone realized that there were problems and that something has to be done. 20 years ago, I have always been the only woman in a conference room, in a client meeting. I was also one of the youngest. Of course, things changed over the past 20 years. But what I can see today is something completely different from what I saw 20 years ago. In terms of gender balance, things have changed significantly. And a representative of the American Bar Association has just told us about the various projects they maintain, and they are offered at an institutional level. So this is not just talk. We can see that the American Bar Association is a self-regulating organization, and they are taking very serious measures. And I personally know that when we talk at ABA meetings, we receive different recommendations on gender balance, on minority balance. We may have stereotypes, and we may sometimes think that this is an over-exaggeration. I also am happy to see that men supported this progress. We can see sometimes that in our profession, men are kings, but they supported this movement. As to our part of the world, unfortunately, we remained where we were 20 years ago, especially if we look at the legal firms. If you look at a normal conference, if you look at the meeting of partners, you may see 11 speakers and maybe 1 or 0 women. An exception is our legal forum here, but it's really sad to say that we're talking about the Vatican meeting when we're talking about legal meetings. They're only men. Why is it so? Why is it that we have so few women in such meetings? Statistically, yes, maybe we can say that we have a lot more women than men in this profession, and the glass ceiling is still there. A lot of colleagues agree with me there. Maybe there are some recipes out there. I'm sure that if we find a successful solution, we would be happy to share it.
Thank you very much. I think what you say about the recipe, that's what we hope we can share and as I say, make together. I'm delighted next to invite Luba to speak. With true female efficiency, she promises me she will go through her slides at a swift pace and, of course, be happy to circulate them to the group afterwards.
How do I switch the slides? How do I flip slides here? Where do I point it? Okay. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'm Lubov Duyko. I'm an attorney at law and a partner chair of the board of partners at S&K Vertical. In 1998, I graduated from the law faculty of the St. Petersburg State University. I started my career as a practicing lawyer in 1999, and over the past 11 years or so, I have been working for S&K Vertical. Together with my partners, we have been able to achieve a lot of progress. We have gained a lot of clients from among corporations and individuals. We now have among our clients UniCredit Bank, Transbank, Megaphone, famous writers, Uliana Lopatkina, the famous ballerina, Ilya Krzyzanowski, a film director, and the list could go on and on. We are a recognized law firm in accordance with all the rankings in Russia today, but I think the accomplishment that I'm the most proud of is thanks to my team, because my team has 48% of women working in it. These are usually young women lawyers. They're usually middle level. We have one young woman who is a senior lawyer, and I am the only woman who is a partner among our partners who are, as you see, predominantly male. Elena Borisenko touched upon two very important points. And in the interests of time, because our time is limited, I would like to focus on just a few aspects here. I think the first aspect will be of particular interest to those of you who are keen on history, because Elena also talks about the history of women in law. Yes, indeed, there was not a single female name among historically famous lawyers in Russia. Few people know that the first woman solicitor was Ekaterina Fleischitz, who in 1909 participated in a trial as a lawyer. Unfortunately, she lost. The trial actually was very unsuccessful because the prosecutor refused to participate in a trial against a woman. So he left the courtroom. After that, a petition was sent to the Senate, and after a long scrutiny of the legislation, they found a ground for expelling Fleischitz from the bar. According to the Law and Courts of 1864, an attorney who appears in court should wear on the lapel a badge of the university where they were conferred a degree. Well, of course, women could not have lapels back in those days. They could not wear jackets, and for that formalistic reason, Ekaterina Fleischitz was expelled. And one more aspect, the second aspect I would like to focus on, has to do with women's representation in law in general. I'm sorry, I'm very bad at, turning the slides. So, women's representation in the legal profession. I completely agree with the previous speakers, my colleagues, who said that a lot of women are entering the profession. The proportion is greater than men, and there are more entry-level women lawyers. However, what happens next is a totally different picture. What happens next is a gender disbalance that we see, as well as vertical gender segregation. There is a very clear trend that we observe that the senior the position in a certain hierarchy, the fewer women we see in those positions. And I can corroborate that using some data that we have. These are some figures and facts that we collected, analyzing some top legal structures and law firms. This is gender representation in various structures, such as the Council of the Federation, the State Duma, the Supreme Court, and the Constitutional Court. All these institutions are dominated by men. If you take the General Prosecutor's Office, it's 100% male, no women there at all. It's the same situation in the elite of the legal profession, the elite lawyers, even though women are numerous in this profession. If you take the most famous lawyers, there will be practically no women among them. For instance, if you take the Moscow top 10 ranking, there are practically no women there. So you cannot ignore the fact that the gender imbalance still persists in the legal profession as well as in the political and administrative fields, because women are also underrepresented among the senior executive officials. I'm not going to talk at length about stereotypes and biases. Everybody recognizes that there are stereotypes indeed, and have been existing for a long time. One point I would like to make here is about one interesting study that was carried out in the run-up to the summit, Women in Law, in 2012, and I would propose to carry a very similar survey for Russia, and please support me. I think that survey came up with very interesting findings, and I would like the same to happen in Russia. I can participate, I'm willing to participate in organizing that, so I'm trying to secure support from you here. I also think that quotas for women are not a very good idea. Jobs quotas are not very good for Russia either. Just very quickly to wrap up, what can be done from a practical standpoint? Well, here my proposals, I think, have a lot in common with the proposals that were formulated as a result of the survey. Just let me list the main points. One is to create typical career tracks in favor of women at the prosecutorial bodies, in courts, to also promote women's leadership, especially with respect to maternity, so that women who have a baby and return to the profession, return to work, so that they can continue working and advancing themselves. Flexible working hours, this is also very important. In my law firm, we use this a lot. We enable women to work from home, to work remotely, to use flexible schedules. I think this is working out very well for us. So this is a very good practice that we would recommend to various bar structures, to legal firms, as well as to government authorities. In order to transform and address the negative gender stereotypes, more attention should be given to the image and the reputation of the woman lawyer. I think there needs to be government intervention, awareness raising, and education on the part of the state through media, through literature, through various vehicles for dissemination of information, so that women are retained in the profession, so that they don't leave. I think it is also very important that the bar does not lose women lawyers, because if we don't do something positive now, women will be leaving, and this is already impacting the quality of legal services in the local market. So only by joining the efforts of men and women in the legal profession can we arrive at a better quality and secure the best results that we would like to see.
Thank you very much indeed and for your determination and commitment to take forward our research throughout Russia, and we'd be very happy to work with you. As we say in English, last but by no means least, I'm very proud to welcome and present Maura McGowan QC, who is Chair of the Bar Council of England and Wales, the sister organisation to the Law Society. Maura.
Thank you very much. As Julia's just said, I'm this year's chair of the Bar Council. The Bar Council in England and Wales represents barristers. We have a split profession, as you know. There are about 150,000 solicitors. There are only 12,000 barristers who practice, as it were, on their own, self-employed. Because we are not in firms, because we do not have regular payment by employers, it's been more difficult over the years for women, I think, to come back after leaving to have a family, things of that sort. There isn't the same structure. It is essential that we bring women back or we keep them. Sorry, is that too loud? No, right. It's essential that barristers, women barristers, who start as they do in equal numbers with the men, either work through their maternity or come back afterwards. Our side of the profession generally makes up those people who go on to become the senior judges. And if the right number of women don't get to the top level of the barrister's profession, then we will not see equal numbers amongst the judiciary. It's currently quite difficult because the majority of women who practice as barristers tend to do criminal work and family work. That is court-based, so flexible working policies don't help. You have to be available to go to court every day. And those are the areas of practice that are publicly funded and are also under the greatest attack because of the economic crisis. So fees are being reduced. It's a less attractive area of work. Women will tend, if we're not careful, not to come back, having started their family. So we have to work hard at that. And there are a number of measures that we're taking already. The first, it's quite simple, it's quite basic, but we've actually opened a nursery. Not just for women, it's for men who want to put their children there during the working day as well, if they want to. But we hope that it sets a tone as much as provides practical help to a limited number of people. Most sets of chambers, which are the groups that we work in order to share expenses, albeit not income, will now allow people to have a holiday from paying rent whilst they leave to have families after they come back. We've seen a big change recently. Lucy and I were present at a legal awards ceremony a week or two ago, and one of the awards that was made went to Hogan Lovells, actually one of our big law firms, for being such a good firm in their employment conditions for women. Now, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, nobody would have thought of that as an award. And it is, again, symbolic. It sets the tone. If firms realise that they will be praised for putting special measures in place, then they will continue to do them and they will work hard. And it adds, doesn't it, to their status, to their corporate social responsibility, because they are showing responsibility for their own employees. Those are predominantly the things that we're doing, but one of the core things about the barrister's profession is that when we leave university, when we do a one-year postgraduate course, we come into the profession and we then do a year's training with a more senior barrister. You spend 6 months simply following that barrister, looking at the work that they do, and then in the second half of the year, the second 6 months, you're allowed to practice yourself. Very small work to start with. But that process means that new entrants to the profession have one person that they are linked to. They have somebody that they can go to, somebody with whom they can maintain contact. In addition to that, we have mentoring schemes, not simply for women, for everybody, for every entrant to the profession. And the Inns of Courts, which are the 4 bodies that we belong to, are working very hard now. They've set up a women's forum. They will organise special sponsorship, if people want it, special mentoring, so that a young woman can be mentored by a woman who's already established herself in practice. And it's that sort of connection, that sort of example, that will bring about the change that we need and continue the change that we've already started. It shouldn't be a question of remark that the solicitors are headed by a woman and the barristers are headed by a woman at the same time. I'm only ever the second woman to have done my job, but it is still something that people comment on. And when we get beyond the stage of people commenting on that sort of thing, we will have reached the change that we want to see. At the moment, women are successfully getting into our senior courts. We've recently almost doubled the number of women in the Court of Appeal, but it's still only 7. And we still only have 1 justice in our Supreme Court who's a woman. And she was an academic, she wasn't a practitioner. But that will get better, perhaps too slowly for some, but it's definitely improving. We can look forward, I think, to a reasonable prospect of having a woman Chief Justice by the end of this year. And if we look to Ireland, our very close neighbour, the Chief Justice there is a woman, the Director of Public Prosecutions there is a woman, their Attorney General is a woman. So the change is happening. We just have to make sure that we don't lose sight of the things that make it valuable to firms, to employers, to the profession as a whole, to keep that going. And one of the big momentums behind it must be judicial diversity. That's what we have to concentrate on. That's what we have to work towards. We are delivering the change. We're just not quite there yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maura, and for focusing on the issues around support, mentoring, and setting an example, and an inspiring one. We have around 10 or so minutes where we could take questions, remarks from the floor, and then just as we close, I shall ask the Minister to say some closing remarks, and then we can all go and do what lawyers do best, network over lunch. So thank you. Can I take any comments or remarks from the floor? Gentleman at the front.
Старший партнер юридической компании.
Senior partner from Pearly Paper and Company, and a father of 2 daughters. Very recently, my elder daughter, who is 15, started showing some very vivid interest for law, and I, as a father, was dreaming of her getting engaged in design or architecture or something else that does not really require being busy for 24 hours a day. When she asked me this question, "Dad, if I decide to be a lawyer, will you support me?" I told her, "Mary, we are now holding a legal forum, the legal forum, and I will definitely go to attend the Women in Law roundtable discussion, and I will give you the answer after we complete the discussion. So tonight I shall tell her that I will support her. I will tell her, girlie, go ahead, do become a lawyer." Thank you.
Well, I hope that other aspiring female lawyers have supportive dads like you, so thank you. Any other comments? Can I take comments or questions? Lord McNally, our Minister of State for Justice, thank you for coming.
Just 2 points. Very famous British feminist Vera Brittain said that the 2 great barriers to the progress of women was men's attitude to women's advancement and women's attitude towards themselves. And I still think that is something. But just, although the government in Britain may be causing the legal profession some problems, we've also done something which I hope will make a difference. We've introduced into our legislation that in appointing judges, although we want the independent panels that appoint judges to still use merit, where equal merit is found between 2 candidates, the panel should use a tipping point towards genders that are underrepresented. And I do believe this will make a change, particularly in the senior appointments, if that tipping point is used by selection panels.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think that is a critical point. It's about fairness, equality and parity. It's not about special measures, but where two candidates are of equal merit to take that decision to advance the balance. So thank you very much for that and for the government's support. Can I take another comment or question? The lady there.
Ольга Биндария, новости, спасибо.
Olga Belgareva from the Novosti Agency. I have a question to Olga. You have discussed the gender vertical for a long time, and thank you for that. Could you please name at least 3 competitive advantages of female lawyers as compared to male lawyers? Why shall a male lawyer select a female lawyer as an employer? Yes, sir, exactly. The specific advantages a woman lawyer would have as compared to men. Well, I believe that there should be parity. No advantages should ever be discussed. Of course, there are some cases where when a woman, just because she's a woman, may be a little bit more scrupulous and a little bit more emotional if a case has anything to do with family matters or bringing up children. But basically, I believe that as professionals, men and women are and should be equal. And the name of my company, S&K Vertical, has nothing to do with the gender diversity either in this country or in the legal profession. It's just a name.
Point as well is what Linda raised. It's actually if you have a diversity of race, gender, background, experience in a legal team, my own view is that can actually lend itself to building a better team of lawyers as much as the individuals. Lucy, I know you want to come back on the point there.
I was only going to say what you've just said.
Oh, sorry. A next comment? Yes.
Здравствуйте, Марина, интервью.
My name is Marina, Dialogue News Agency. We are enjoying a panel discussion with the participation of brilliant experts from different countries. My question is, what was the role of stereotypes or prejudices in your practice? You might have some very interesting stories to tell, do you? Now, with regard to prejudices or stereotypes, in my own practice, I have never had to face gender manipulations. But 19 years ago, when I started my career, I came to work as an assistant lawyer, and I was the only young girl among 10 people. So I had to work for free for 6 months just to prove my professional capabilities. And I had to prove that I was able to bring in clients. Also, when I had my first child, and I had 2, I had to go through some very difficult times. Lawyers do not get too much support from the government, nor do they get any significant support from their employers. So I had to very thoroughly plan my working hours so that I could stay in the profession.
Да, по поводу стереотипов, когда я в США вот работала.
With regard to prejudices, back when I was practicing in the United States, I was the only woman in the conference room, and I was the one to be asked to go get some coffee. I could write a book about this, you know. Another prejudice, you know, I had when I started my own legal company, I had my junior partner who was a man, but at any meeting everybody addressed him because they thought he was the senior one, not me.
I didn't really receive any prejudice. Oh, sorry. Either I didn't notice or it didn't happen. Is it on now?
Yeah.
In the early part of my career, I was a criminal lawyer. This was before I had children. Once I had children, I could see the problems that were going to loom up, and so I dealt with those by setting up my own practice, because I find that, owning my own practice, I'm always very fair to myself, and this was a solution that worked for me.
When I was very junior, had only just started, a friend of mine who was a solicitor acted for a very, very famous rock star who'd been stopped for driving, I think, too fast or too dangerously. And this friend said, this will be a great case for you, it'll be a great start, it'll be very well paid. So I thought, wonderful, I shall go off and represent this very famous rock star. He wasn't at all very rock and roll, because he refused to be represented by a woman. But fortunately that hasn't happened since, so it is just the stereotypes, it's make the coffee. No more than that, I think.
Well, I'm sure he's very sorry now. The minister's going to tell us a short story, and the lady there afterwards.
I will tell you a different story of a reversed prejudice. Back when I just graduated from the university and then joined the Lawyers Association, the Bar Association, I quite soon had a very successful practice with a lot of clients. I was quite young back then. I was pretty much fresh out of the university. And once I had to negotiate with the other party, the opposing party never understood that me sitting beside the client was somebody serious. So this is a prejudice. People see a young woman and they have to exhaust the arguments to eventually turn to her. They did not consider me as somebody presenting any danger for them. They might have listened to what I say more if I were a middle-aged man. But actually, this whole situation played to my advantage. So this is a case of a reversed prejudice. Even with the coffee thing, you may find yourself at an advantage and grow your fees.
Natalia Tarova, I'm a partner in a legal firm in Moscow. It's true that it's not very easy for us. And in our profession, we face harsh competition. There's a fine line between an attempt to combine the role of a lawyer, a professional, a mother, a woman. It's very hard to follow this line as if stepping on very thin ice. But to everything that has been said here today, I can say only this. The only way out is to help each other. And that's why among speakers we only have women. And we have men in the audience, but we should support each other. And that's where our victory lies. Thank you.
I just wanted to say in response to that, I mean, I completely agree with you. And one of the suggestions that I've heard being put about is that women within a firm... No, it's on. Women within a firm at all levels could perhaps meet regularly, so that apart from individual mentoring, there's actually a sharing of experiences. Oh yeah, I went through that, and this is something that within firms or across firms would be very helpful for women, not just at forums like this, but in everyday life.
Thank you. I think, unfortunately, our time is coming to a close. It's clear that we have a lot to discuss, a lot of ways in which to support each other. With the Minister's help, we will publish our report on the St. Petersburg Forum website, or we can create a LinkedIn group, and maybe we can have another session next year. And if I could just invite you to make some closing remarks, and thank you all and our panelists today.
Thank you very much, Julie. Thank you very much, ABA. Thank you for initiating this session. I think we had a very interesting discussion. It was quite stimulating, and I totally agree with my colleagues who said that we have to support each other. The problem that we face, the issues that we have touched upon require a discussion, debate, and I agree that maybe we should do additional research in Russia. I frankly doubt some of the figures that were shown by Lyubov, especially about the prosecutor's office, because every time I have a general discussion on some issues, I have women coming to me. Maybe they send women because I am a woman, I don't know. But I can see that they have a lot of women. I understand that the top managers at the general prosecutor's office are men, but they still have a lot of women. There's another thing I would like to highlight. I again would tend to agree with Lord Minister, who mentioned two main problems for women lawyers. And maybe I will say something that my colleagues would not agree to. I don't think that men take it hard when women advance. The problem that I see is a problem that Lucy mentioned. Setting your targets, setting your objectives. Women do not always strategically plan their life. Very often they do not understand what they want, what resources they can use, and how they want to combine the two aspects of their life. A lot of women take an irrational way and they just follow the stream. They don't set the targets. I think that both in Russia and in other countries, women who really want to succeed will be able to do that. And in fact, they will probably be able to do that much faster than men, because we are like that. If a woman wants something, she will definitely get it. Women often want many different things, and often these are things that come in conflict to each other. So I would wish all of us women here to be successful. I would like to wish all men who are here and who are not here, I would like to wish them to be patient. And I have no doubts whatsoever that the legal profession, law, does not differentiate between men and women. Life plays it this way. When professionals become professionals, it doesn't really matter what nationality you are, what gender you are, what personal characteristics you may have. Professionals are always capable of throwing aside insignificant details, and what remains at the core is their professional ability. And let me explain why we have this. The plenary was structured this way. We had Cecilia Malmström once who participated in the plenary. We had other women speakers for our plenaries. And when we wanted to form a panel, my management told me that we are going to be accused of gender inequality and gender bias because we had no women at the panel during the plenary. And I said, we are professionals. We have a concept. We want to invite people who would fit this particular concept. We want to invite people who are the best professionals in this particular area. And I hope that if nothing changes, the Minister of Justice of France will come here. We have already invited her to participate in our women-related panel. But we invited her not because she is a woman, but because she is a top professional. Thank you to all.